Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome everybody to today's AAII webinar. My name is John Bajkowski. I'm president of the American Association of Individual Investors, and I'll be moderating today's event. To lead today's discussion is Wayne Thorpe. He's the program manager of Stock Investor Pro, as well as the senior financial analyst here at the AAII. For the next hour, Wayne will walk you through the process of building your own stock screens using Stock Investor Pro. It happens to be AAII's Fundamental Stock Analysis Stock Screening Research Database program. He will highlight the features of the Stock Screen Editor, the primary tool that's used to build custom screens in the program. He's going to show some of the unique data elements that are available for screening. And we'll also show you how to quickly create data views to analyze the information once you run your screen. Would you please welcome, and we'll have hopefully some time at the end for some question and answer periods. This webinar is being recorded. It will be posted in the stock screen area, stock investor area of AAII.com before the end of the day tomorrow. Those of you who signed up to receive the monthly Stock Investor News email will also be sent a link to this webinar. With that, I will be turning things over to Wayne.
Thank you, John, and welcome everyone to today's Stock Investor webinar. Today I'll be discussing how you can use Stock Investor Pro, and specifically the screen editor within the program, to create, save, and modify your own screening filters. With Stock Investor, you can bring together a collection of quantitative comparison statements and apply them to a collection of companies to see which, if any, meet those criteria. This collection of statements can consist of almost any of the 2,000 plus data fields that are in Stock Investor, as well as custom fields that you're able to create within the program. But this is a topic for another day. Furthermore, the group of companies against which the filters are run may be the entire stock universe or a subset of companies, such as a loaded portfolio. So let's get started. We first begin by actually opening Stock Investor, the screen editor of Stock Investor. And there's a variety of ways in which you can do this. You can first do this by clicking on the funnel icon on the toolbar menu at the very top of the program, or you can also choose by going to the Tools menu at the top of the program and selecting Screen Editor. Either way will then open the Screen Editor window within Stock Investor. Now, as you can see from the Screen Editor window that is opened, there are a number of different elements to the screen editor, and that will be the primary focus of my presentation. This presentation today will actually be able to walk you through all of these different elements. So let's just sort of start from the top and work our way down. First, you have this name element here, which is actually a drop-down menu. When you click on the little down arrow next to name, it will then activate the pull-down menu, where you can see all of the screens that are either predefined within the program, and all of the predefined screens within Stock Investor are always noted by an asterisk. Or if you've created your own stock screens already, those will also appear within this list. Now, if you were to select a screen off of this list, for example, let's select the John Templeton screen. When you select a screen, all of the criteria that make up that screen are then loaded into the screen editor. But our focus today is actually how you can go about creating your own custom screens. So we'll go back actually and click New, and that will then allow us to actually generate a new stock screen. But beyond that, one other element to point out is this portfolio element, also at the top of the screen editor. This tells us the set of companies, or the active set of companies, against which our screen is going to be run. In this case, I currently don't have a portfolio loaded, so we have all of the 6,619 companies that are currently in the Stock Investor Pro database. That's the active set of companies that we'll be screening against. Now, I'll be showing a little bit later where you can actually also create a portfolio and run screens against that portfolio as well. So for now, we're actually going to then walk through the different elements of the stock editor, screen editor. As you can see, the screen editor is set up similarly to an Excel or a spreadsheet, where it's divided into both rows and columns. And so just walk you through some of these columns here. The first one is CON, which is short for connector. And actually you have the ability to use both AND or connectors within Stock Investor. Now, the use of OR connectors as well as parentheses, which you can see also are elements of the screen editor, those are slightly more advanced topics, and we could probably spend a good hour just discussing those elements. So I'm actually going to skip over those today, and the examples that I'll be talking about will use exclusively AND connectors. However, if you go to the Stock Investor area of AI.com, if you go to www.ai.com and go to the Stock Investor Pro area, we have a complete archive of past Stock Investor News articles, and there's actually a Stock Investor News article that deals with the use of parentheses and or connectors. So if you go to the Stock Investor Pro area of AI.com, and within the important links area, if you select Stock and SI News Archive, it is actually the February 2014 issue of Stock Investor News, creating advanced stock screens using the OR function and parentheses. So if you want to learn more on how to use OR connectors as well as parentheses within Stock Investor, there'll be a Stock Investor News print article as well as a video tutorial that will walk you through those steps. So after the connector and the open parentheses item, you then have the field cell. And this is actually the field that you're going to select for screening. Now if you were to click in this screen in the field cell, this will bring up the field picker, which you'll find the field picker throughout multiple elements of Stock Investor Pro. You'll find this as well in the custom field editor as well. All of the data fields in Stock Investor Pro are divided into data categories, and this field picker is actually all of the different data categories that are in Stock Investor. Now for new users, I've been told, and for myself when I first started using the program nearly 20 years ago now, one of the most difficult things for me first starting out as a new user was knowing which data category a particular data field was in. But luckily you do have some resources at your fingertips that allow you to find that information out. The easiest way is to go to the help system. So if you go to the help menu at the top again of the program and go to contents and index, this will then open up the Stock Investor help system. And we want to go to the field definitions area. So if you click on the plus sign next to field definitions, and then in this case, I want to be looking at things in an alphabetical nature, because actually my first element, I'm actually going to eliminate any stocks that trade, foreign stocks that trade on U.S. exchanges as American Depository Receipts, or ADRs, or ADSs. So if I go to the alphabetical listing of the fields and open up the A and go down to ADR ADS stock, this will then, on the right side of the help window, show you the field definition for ADR ADS stock. But beyond that, it also gives you what data category it is in. So in this case, the ADR ADS stock data field is in the company information data category. So I can go back into the screen editor and come down to the company information data category and click on the plus sign next to it. And at the very top, again, these the categories as well as data fields within each data category are listed in alphabetical order. You can then find ADR ADS stock, and to add that to my screen then, I double click on it. So now I have ADR ADS stock in the field. Now as I said, I want to actually exclude companies that trade as ADRs. So the next column then is the operators. So this is where you're able to, if it's a numeric option, and you'll see that in just a moment, you'll have such things as greater than, less than, equal to, not equal to, etc. But since this is a textual field, in this case, all I'm interested in is I want companies who has an ADR, ADS stock designation that is false. So I do not want any companies that trade as ADR, ADS stocks. Now in this example, we have nothing, we're done. This particular piece of criteria is finished. So our first piece of criterion then is ADR, ADS stock is false. Now at this point we can actually touch on a couple of elements at the bottom of the screen editor here. The first being the how many button. If we were to click the how many button, we see that 6,176 companies are not ADRs or ADSs within the Stock Investor Pro universe. So we've gone from 6,619 companies down to 6,176 companies. At this point, I can also talk about the distinction between the how many button and the apply button. I use the how many button primarily to see, I mean, you can use them interchangeably, but I use the how many button to basically tell me, to show me how many companies pass each individual line of my stock screen, as well as tells me how many companies pass the entirety of my stock screen. Now it's important to realize that if you do click the how many button, that's all it will do is tell you how many companies pass each individual line of criteria and how many companies pass the totality of your stock screen. If you can see here in the background, we still have 6,619 companies selected within our stock notebook. So at this point, nothing has changed. We have not actually what we call applied that stock screen to our stock notebook. So we then want to go back to our screen editor, and this is where then the apply button comes into play. The apply button actually then takes it one step further. It shows you how many companies pass each individual filter, will tell you how many companies pass your entire stock screen, but then it also loads those companies into the stock notebook. So if you see, I just clicked the apply button and almost instantaneously the 6,176 companies that meet our ADS, our ADR is false screen are now loaded into the stock notebook. So, but now we can go back. Let's see. So let's go back now and actually we want to look at some other unique data elements that you can use for your stock screening. One element, one set of data within Stock Investor that I find very useful and somewhat unique is the percent rank data. Now for those of you that aren't familiar with percent rank data in Stock Investor Pro, what we do is we take a particular data field, let's say for example relative strength for week. For all of the companies that have a valid relative strength for week value in Stock Investor Pro, we then break those companies down, this group of companies down into individual percentiles. And we assign a percentage rank to them, and you can then use that for screening purposes. So let's say I want to find companies that aren't ADR or ADS stocks, but that also rank, let's say, in the top 25% of the overall database as far as 26-week relative strength. So as we can see here, the field picker percent rank is at the very top of the field picker. So we can click on the plus sign to expand that out. And again, these are in alphabetical order. So I'm going to go down to percent rank, relative strength, 26-week. Now in this case, again, I'm looking for companies that rank in the top 25% of the overall database, which on the flip side means then that the company resides in the 75th percentile. We were looking for companies that are in at least the 75th percentile. So we have percent rank, relative strength, 26-week. In our operator cell then, we're going to select, in this case, I'm going to select greater than or equal to. So if a company is in the 25th percentile or higher, whereas before if you wanted just to be above the 25th percentile, then you'd use the greater than. In this case, we're going to use greater than or equal to. Now, I'm going to skip over the factor column for just a moment. The vast majority of times, you will have nothing entered into the factor cell. But actually, I can illustrate actually where improper use of the factors column comes into play. So let's say I'm looking for companies that are in the top 75th percentile or higher. So let's say, for example, I said, okay, I'm looking for 75. So in this case, where it should go in the compare to cell, I've entered 75 into the factor cell. So I enter that in, and so I want to look at what's going on here. Well, two things immediately jump out. When I click the How Many button, we can see that there is no number in the Count On cell for this particular line of criteria. Secondly, the Apply button has been grayed out. Now, anytime you've created a screen and the Apply button is grayed out, that means that that there is at least one line of criteria within the screen that's invalid, which then has rendered the entire screen invalid. And the vast majority of times when members reach out to us and explain that they're having this type of problem, I would say 98% of the time they've entered they've put something in the factor cell that should have gone in the compare to cell. So I'm going to delete the 75 from the factor cell, go over to the compare to cell. Now when you click in the compare to cell once, this will bring up again the field picker that we saw earlier. But in this case, we want to enter in a numeric value. So all you have to do is click again. The field picker remains, but if you can see here, you have a flashing cursor now in the background. We're going to enter in 75 and enter. So now we have percent rank, relative strength, 26 week, greater than or equal to 75. Now this time, when we click the How Many button, we have companies, a number that appears in that line. So there's 1,686 companies that rank in the top 25% of the overall database as terms of 26-week relative strength. And when we click the Apply button now, the 1,595 companies that make up our entire screen are now loaded into the stock notebook. Now I want to point out that when you are dealing with percent ranks, these are absolute numbers. When companies are put into their respective percentile ranks across all data fields, all we're doing is looking from the lowest to the highest. But depending on the data field that you're looking at and the type of investor that you are, having the highest percentile rank might not be the best. Now, if you're a momentum investor, in this case, a company that ranks highly as far as relative strength is a good thing. But let's say you're a value investor, such as myself, and let's say I want to find companies that rank in the bottom 25% as far as the price-to-book ratio. So we would again click in the field cell, again click on the plus sign next to percent rank, and now this time we scroll down to, because again once things are in alphabetical order, percent rank price to book, and I double click on that. Now in this case again I want a company to rank in the bottom 25%. So this means now I'm looking at the less than or equal to value. So as we learned earlier, we're not going to be entering anything into the factor cell, and after clicking once and then twice, we can type in 25 to look for companies again that are no higher than the 25th percentile of the entire universe of stock investor stocks as far as price to book goes. So we can click How Many. So we see that there's 1,339 companies that rank in the bottom 25% of the stock notebook. And if we were to click the How Many button, then the 188 companies that are passing all three pieces of this screen now are now loaded into the stock notebook. But there's one thing that just came to mind that I want to point out is, let's say for example we want companies that rank in the top 25%. So let's rearrange this. So we got percent rank price to book greater than or equal to 75. I want to point out that you'll see that even though we're looking for companies that rank in the top 25% for both of these fields, that the number of companies that pass these two filters differs. Because again, in order for a company to be placed into a percentile, a company has to have a valid field for that particular data point. So for this example, since there are fewer companies that have a current, in this case there's only 1,000, well in this case apparently there are fewer companies that have a valid price to book ratio versus companies that have a valid 26-week relative strength value. Now probably coming in here is if a company has negative equity or negative book value, that would then render a null or an invalid, a not valid value. So they would not be considered when we're calculating the percentiles. So again, just because we're looking for companies, again, in both cases in the top 25%, don't be surprised if you see that the companies that pass will differ from line to line. So I'm going to swap this back now to go back to where we were. So now another piece of, another set of data that is unique within Stock Investor is the ability to screen against industry, sector, as well as universal industries, averages and medians. So let's say, for example, we've already looked for companies that are in the bottom 25% as far as price to get book go. But let's say I'm a fan of John Neff, and if you're familiar with the John Neff screen, one of his pieces of criteria is he looks at a field which is called the dividend adjusted PEG ratio. And he looks for companies whose dividend adjusted PEG ratio is no more than half that of the universal median, the median value for the entire stock universe. So because I've been using the program for almost 20 years, knows that the dividend adjusted PEG ratio is a multiple. But again, you could go to the help system and look up PE to dividend adjusted, let's see, well actually we'll just do it here really quickly. So we go back to the help system, alphabetical listings, we'll click on P because it's PE. In this case, the value is the PE to dividend adjusted estimated EPS growth. So it's comparing on the numerator is the trailing PE ratio, and the denominator is the sum of the dividend yield and the estimated earnings growth rate for the next 3 to 5 years. And we can see here that that field resides in the multiples data category. So we've got the multiples data category opened up in the field picker. And we're going to select PE to dividend adjusted EPS estimated growth. And in the case, again, because I tend to be more of a value investor, I want companies who have a dividend adjusted PEG ratio that is no more than half that of the median value for the entire stock universe. So I'm going to select, in this case, I'm actually just going to select less than. Now this is where the factors item comes into play, because again, we want companies whose PE to dividend adjusted EPS estimated growth field value is less than half, or 0.5, that of the universal median. So just to walk you through this again, we have the PE to dividend adjusted EPS estimated growth is less than whatever you enter into the factor column is multiplied by whatever either value or field you selected in the compare to cell in that same line. So 1/2 that of whatever the median dividend adjusted PEG ratio is for the entire stock universe. Now if I wanted to, I could also select, actually I take that back. In this case, we only have universal medians in this case for this particular field. So if we were to click how many, we can see that there's only currently 191 companies that have a dividend adjusted PEG ratio that's less than half that of the universal median for that field. And we've gone from 6,619 companies down to only 4 with just 4 pieces of criteria, which is ultimately what I find most beneficial about stock screening is, you know, when we first started out, we had almost 7,000 companies. And that's an awful lot of companies just to randomly go through. You spend a lot of time trying to analyze all of these companies. But if you look for companies that have a specific set of characteristics, and if you can quantify those characteristics, you can create a stock screen, and literally with a click of a button, we've gone from 6,619 companies down to only 4 companies. And these companies, let's see, we have AV Homes, Trinity Industries, UCP, and William Lyons Homes. So interesting, we have 3 construction companies and 1 railroad, which actually probably isn't surprising right now given the current economic climate. Home builders have been really beaten down of late, as have railroads. So we've created a very rudimentary screen looking at some of the more unique data that's in Stock Investor. But now I want to walk you quickly through, well, let's first of all, we have the option of saving it, the Save button, or Save As. In this case, since this is...
Wait, I've got a quick question here for you, Wayne, but someone's asking, where do you find the median PE again, please?
The median PE, just the median PE, or the median dividend adjusted PEG?
I think in this case, you have the criteria here that looks for the PE to...
okay.
Where does that median appear in the picker?
Sure. So if you were to click in the Compare To cell, you have averages, standard deviations, and then you have medians. If you click on the plus sign, in this case, our only option is the universal median. So that is where you would find it here. And then by double-clicking, in some fields also will offer a sector and an industry median. Not all of the data fields in Stock Investor have that option. But in this case, all we have is the universal median. So by double-clicking that, that is where you'd find the median for that particular field.
Thank you.
But just to point out, because not all data fields have that sector or industry option, let's say, for example, if we just were looking at PE, just because I'm within this listing within the help system, if we were to click on PE, we can see that as far as the field definition goes, beyond the data category, which is in multiples, we see that it also, we have a percent rank. So if you can screen on a percent rank of the PE ratio within Stock Investor, but we also have industry and sector medians for the PE ratio as well. So if you're curious to know whether or not a particular company has that, obviously if you go within the field picker and you don't have sector or industry as an option, then that's pretty telling there, but you can also find that information within the help system as well. So getting back to actually saving our screen, in this case, since this is a brand new screen, the Save and the Save As buttons will achieve the exact same functionality. So if we click Save, we'll just do this, name this Test, and click OK. So now, if we were to close out the screen editor and unload everything here. So let's say, I close the program, come back the next day or a week or a month from now. Yes, and so we say, okay, I want to rerun that screen. Well, you have a couple of ways to do this. A, you have the screen drop-down menu at the very top of the program. And if you scroll down, by default, all of the predefined screens have an asterisk, and they will appear first alphabetically. One way in which I bypass that is I often will do, if I'm naming a screen, I'll do a space and then an underscore and then the name, and that will then force them to the top. But in this case, our test is at the very bottom, and if you were to select that from here, then it will automatically load those results in there. But you can also then, if we were to unload that from here, and go back to the screen editor, if we were to just open this the first time, then within the screen editor, again, we can go to the test. That will also, well, A, load all of the criteria. So if we wanted to, we could edit this, but then also we can do how many and apply. Now let's say, for example, I wanted to enter another piece of criteria. Let's say, I want companies that have positive earnings over the last 12 months. So in this case, I'll be looking at earnings per share, which is in the earnings per share trailing 12 months, which is in the income statement annual data category. So we're going to scroll down, and I always like to look at EPS diluted continuing. Continuing operations is a better indication of the earnings that the company will be generating going forward. Typically, we'll exclude one-time items as well as the company has, discontinued operations and whatnot. So let's choose EPS diluted continuing 12M greater than, and again in this case we'll once again leave our factor cell blank, and then after clicking in the compare to cell twice, I just want to enter in 0. So in this case, all of the companies that had passed previously still also had positive earnings over the trailing 12 months. But now, since I've edited this screen, I have a couple of options. If I want to just overwrite and, this is the screen I want to use going forward, if I were to click Save, then this new criteria that I've added would be saved as part of this test portfolio. But let's say I want to retain this original test screen and I want to create this new screen. So this is where the Save As would come into play, and we're going to name this Test 2. So our original test screen didn't have that earnings per share criteria, whereas our Test 2 does. So again, a very rudimentary discussion as far as some of the more unique data elements within Stock Investor. One other thing.
I'd like to interrupt you with a quick question here. As long as all of these various lines of the filter lines are connected with an AND statement, I've got a question here whether or not it matters what order they're presented in. Like, would you have more companies pass this particular filter if they were given in a different order, if the filters were presented in a different order?
You're actually reading my mind, because actually that was the exact next thing I was going to talk about. If you are creating a screen that is made up exclusively of AND connectors, the order will not matter at all. And we can use some of our buttons here to bear that out. So we've got our screen here. 4 companies pass: AV Homes, Trinity Industries, UCP, and William Lyon Homes. Now let's say, for example, if I click in the PE to dividend adjusted PEG ratio line and click the move up, I can then move up individual lines of criteria within the screen using the move up and the move down button. So let's just move dividend adjusted PEG all the way to the top, and let's move ADR ADS stock all the way to the bottom. Click the How Many button again, still 4 companies pass. Click the Apply button, we still have our same number of companies. So again, when you're creating a screen that consists exclusively of AND connectors, the order in which the criterion are entered in do not matter. That will not be the case when you're using parentheses or connectors. So, and that's why, again, this is a very more advanced topic of discussion that literally could probably take up a full hour of a discussion all by itself. If you are interested in using those, I would strongly suggest, again, the article that I mentioned earlier. Let's see here. The Creating Advanced Stock Screens Using the OR Function and Parentheses. Because I've run across people that thought they understood the nature of parentheses and the OR function and actually misunderstood what was going on with it, and because depending on how you use them, you could get very different results. And if you are using them improperly, then you could be potentially ending up with passing companies that actually should not be passing. So this is something you want to be very careful about and make sure you understand the concepts behind them before you delve into them. Now one other thing that's I find very useful is, let's say, the duplicate. If you're creating a screen that involves a lot of data fields within the very same data category. So let's say if I'm going to actually create a new screen, and let's say going to once again exclude companies. We're going to exclude companies that are in ADS stock. But let's say also I want to limit companies that are in the, limit them to a specific industry. If you are going to be using data fields that are in the same data category, you can use this duplicate to save yourself some time. So let's say, again, the ADR ADS stock is in the company information data category, and as well as sector and industry classifications are also within company information. So if I click duplicate, I'll have the same piece of criteria, but you're automatically plopped into the same data category. So in this case, instead of having to scroll down to company information, click the plus sign next to it, et cetera, now all I have to do is say, okay, I can just go down to industry, and let's say I want to just look for companies that are in the non-alcoholic beverage industry. So that is one area where the duplicate concept comes into play. One other element of the screen editor that I want to talk about then is the make view. Inevitably, you set up your screen, you run your screen, you have your set of passing companies, but then you're also going to want to analyze those companies. And you probably want to see, if you are looking at a specific set of criteria, such as what we've set up here, you probably want to see what those values are for your passing companies. Well, a data view is a collection of data points within Stock Investor Pro. And this is a feature that we added a couple of years ago. And if you were to click the Make View button, what that actually does is it takes all of the data fields that you are using within whatever screen you've set up, and it will actually then populate a data view within Stock Investor. So we can see here, and actually by default, it will always add company name and ticker, which I find is very useful to always have in whatever view you're creating. But then you see we have ADR, ADS stock, percent rank relative strength 26-week, percent rank price to book, dividend adjusted PEG ratio, as well as EPS. So all we have to do is we have a ready-made view. Again, in this case, since we're creating a new view, save or save as really doesn't matter. I'm actually going to name this also test and say OK. And we can go ahead and close the view editor. So now I've applied my screen. We have our 4 passing companies. And then if I go to the view pull-down menu, which you have a collection of predefined views already in the software as well, but if you were to select test, now we can see, okay, these are all the different data fields that I was looking at to create my test2 screen, and now I can see what these actual data values are. So for example, we can see that, again, because we were looking for companies that ranked in the top 25% as far as relative strength over the last 26 weeks, our lowest value is 79. We were looking for companies that were no higher than the 25th percentile as far as percent rank. So as we'd hope, we see that the highest value here is only 25, et cetera, et cetera. So that covers, again, a very rudimentary discussion of setting up a screen. But I also said at the beginning that I would also show you that when you're running a screen, you're running that against either the entire set of companies or a portfolio. So let's say, for example, and actually let's create our own portfolio rather quickly, is if you've read my articles over the years, you probably know that I'm born and raised in the state of Michigan. We'll always have some roots in Michigan. So let's actually create a portfolio of Michigan stocks. So in this case, we're going to be state equals MI because we use abbreviations within Stock Investor. So we have 84 companies that are based in the state of Michigan. So let's go ahead now. Now, if you run a screen and you want to save those companies that pass a screen as a portfolio, first thing you want to do is you set up your screen, which we've done here. You then want to apply it, and then within the program menu, if you go to File and you want to save notebook as portfolio. So again, because we've loaded this screen, our active set of companies within the stock notebook are the 84 companies that are based in Michigan. So save notebook as portfolio, and we're just going to name this Michigan Stocks. So we're going to close our screen editor now. So let's say I want to run a screen against a portfolio of stocks. In this case, it's the result of a very basic stock screen. You can create a portfolio that you can manually enter in ticker symbols. So if you have a sort of a watch list of stocks, you can create a portfolio that way as well. But once you've created your portfolio, you would then load that. You would load that portfolio. So again, we have the 84 stocks that are based in Michigan. And this data is actually through yesterday. So this is 11/29 data. So now if we were to reopen the screen editor, we see that our active companies have changed. Before, where it said portfolio none, 6,619 active companies, we can now see that companies in current portfolio 84. So now I'm not sure if we're going to get any companies that are going to pass this, but let's say I want to run the price of sales screen against my 84 Michigan stocks. So what you would do is you would load your screen from the drop-down menu. Again, these can be predefined screens or screens that you create yourself. So in this case, again, we're going to look at the price of sales screen. And we're going to click how many. We see that 0 companies pass, which isn't surprising. I was curious if any of, I could spend a lot of time doing this. But again, that is at least shows you how you can actually run a screen against a portfolio of stocks. So again, if it's a watch list of companies, perhaps the best example is with the shadow stock screen. We've have the current set of companies, but then those of you that might have sat in, I think previously in our first webinar, I also talked about the fact that you can set up almost cell screens in Stock Investor as well. And so one thing we do is we load the list of passing shadow stock companies, and I have created a quote-unquote cell screen based on the shadow stock screening criteria, and we can apply that cell screen against the current set of companies to see if any companies pass. So that sort of wraps up what I was hoping to get through today. Again, a very basic discussion of how you can go about setting up a stock screen, some of the more unique screening data values that you can use for screening purposes, how you can create a sort of a ready-made data view based on the criteria that you're using, as well as then running a stock screen against a portfolio of companies. And this has already taken us almost 3/4 of an hour. So I guess if there's any questions pertaining to screening, setting up custom screens or whatnot within Stock Investor, John, have you seen any questions that have come in that look interesting?
Sure. Well, first of all, once you create a screen, or a view or anything like that, how does one go about and delete it? Let's say you've built up too many and you want to get rid of some of them. Is there a way to actually get rid of them?
Well, certainly. Just unload everything here first. So the question is, how do I go about deleting any user-defined elements that I might have created. So this could be a custom portfolio, a custom screen, a custom view, or a custom data field. The way in which you would do that is if you go to the Edit menu within Stock Investor and go to Delete. And from there, at the Delete window that comes up, you can choose between notebooks, portfolios, screens, views, or custom fields. In this case, I strongly suggest not deleting, and actually I'd be curious, I don't believe you may be able to delete the custom ones, but
Well, that was actually one of the questions. I've got a member here who
you can actually find out.
does delete the predefined screens, but they always come back whenever they reinstall, and just would like us to consider that option of maybe giving them the option of installing those or not.
Certainly. We'll add that to our considerations list. But you can actually delete predefined ones, but as the user has pointed out, the predefined data is reloaded every time you update the program. But in this case, again, if we wanted to delete, let's say we wanted to delete the test2 screen that I created, it's a matter of clicking delete and then done, and then we can see here our test2 screen is no longer with us. So that's, and you can, again, it's the choose from the drop-down menu if you have a portfolio you'd like to delete, a data view, or if you're more advanced and work with actual notebook templates, that is how you would go about deleting custom elements.
Another question I have here, it has to do with perhaps the naming of the screens, predefined screens versus the screens on our website. And one example given is that in the predefined area, the screen called free cash flow is not necessarily obvious as to which screen that is in our stock screens area. But for those of you who are listening, the free cash flow screen is available on our stock screen section, but it's called the price to free cash flow screen.
Yes.
Go ahead.
So I guess ultimately the question is why the discrepancy?
Correct.
And that's, we've gotten that question from time to time, and truth be told, it's probably a matter of us making that modification, either offering somewhat of a key that even if we keep those designations, maybe in parentheses or something, the name of the corresponding screen within Stock Investor. So there is no perhaps true reason, but it's something that we could rectify.
Another question I have here, if someone's trying to identify REITs or MLPs, is there any way to do that in a screening context?
Not directly. We're actually in the process of, hopefully in the next month or two, actually we will be moving towards a new set of industry and sector designations. The designations that are currently within Stock Investor are being retired by Thomson Reuters, so we're moving to a new designation that is more granular. Right now, if you wanted to eliminate REITs, the best but not most perfect, the best but not a perfect method to do so is if you go to company information, and this would be an industry designation. So if we go to company information, industry, and since we want to, in this case,
why don't you just make it equal to that? Why don't you let's find the REITs?
Okay. So in this case, we want to find REITs. So the closest is industry designation that captures REITs, but probably also other companies as well, is real estate operations. So industry equals real estate operations. We have 233 companies that pass, and so you've got, I can see.
If you click on them and show the description of the name, would that be helpful?
So Acadia Realty Trust is a real estate investment trust. ACRE is a commercial real estate investment operating company. Doesn't look like Advanced Auction Technologies is a REIT. although derives revenue solely from its lease from its real estate. So I guess from that standpoint, it is more of a real. Its primary operations is real estate, but it's not. Probably has the company structure of a REIT. But again, industry equals, if you are looking for REITs, it would be industry equals real estate operations. If you wish to exclude companies, it would be industry not equals real estate operations. But again, once we move to this new industry and sector classification, hopefully in the next several weeks, they're more granular and actually to be able to eliminate specifically equity REITs and the like.
What's the difference between a portfolio and a notebook?
The difference between a portfolio and a notebook. A notebook, for a lack of a better term, is actually a template. When you open Stock Investor Pro, stock notebook number 1, which is probably the default notebook, has no portfolios, no screen, and the standard view loaded, and is ranked in ascending order by company name. But let's say, I want to, again, I'm a big NEF fan. So let's say if I apply the NEF screen, let's do this really quick here. Apply our NEF view, and then I'm going to rank that by ascending order by the dividend adjusted PEG ratio. So we have, again, a screen loaded, a view loaded, and a ranking. Now I can then save this as a notebook, and I'm going to call it NEF. So now I'm going to unload everything. So we're back to just like we just opened the program for the very first, we've just opened the program fresh. I'm going to go to File, and I'm going to Open Notebook, and I'm going to choose my NEF. And so that immediately will open a notebook that has, again, the NEF screen, our NEF view, and our ranking order that we all specified. A portfolio is simply a collection of data, a collection of tickers. That you can either, the results of the stock screen, you can actually import tickers into the portfolio editor, or you can manually enter in tickers and save it as a portfolio. So that is the difference between a portfolio and a notebook.
Now, when you're working within the screening editor and you want to duplicate a line or insert a line, does it erase what's below that particular element? Hello, Wayne?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Sorry, I couldn't hear you before.
Sorry. So the question is whether or not an insert or duplicate that deletes any lines of criteria. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So let's say I want to duplicate ADR ADS stock. As we can see, when you do that, all that does is, doesn't matter where you are within the whatever line of criteria you're on. If you click duplicate, it'll always add that to the very last line of the screen. But let's say I want to insert a screen, a line of criteria. So let's say I want to add a new line and the second line. All that does is bump things down. The insert or duplicate options will never delete a line of criteria. The only time that will happen is if you actually use the delete button. That will delete it, and the delete all will actually wipe out all of the lines, all the criteria within your screen, and basically give you a clean screen editor.
Now, if someone wants to export the results of a screen and limit what kind of fields are being exported? Is there one, or how many different ways can you actually export information from the program?
Technically there's two, but I strongly recommend only doing one. And let's say, for example, I want to, easiest way is to, let's rerun my NEF. So I have, 12 companies that pass my NEF screen. I have a minimized number of data fields, in this case the data fields that are in my NEF view, and I have a specific screening order. The best and easiest way to export these companies is simply to right-click anywhere within the stock notebook and choose Copy Notebook to Clipboard. And depending on how many companies and data fields, that could be instantaneous or it may take a few seconds. Then what you would do is open up Excel and simply paste, and there you have your passing companies, your data fields, and it retains the rank order that you have. There is no, because this might be a question that also has come up, there is no bulk export where basically you can click a certain button and it will export all of the data fields for all of the 6,619 companies that are in the database. There are much more advanced users out there that have actually created their own data extraction and data manipulation applications that they actually never even open Stock Investor. It just strictly reads the database files that make up the software. But within Stock Investor, there is no mass data dump. This is, I think you're limited to 254 data fields in a particular view, but you could export 254 data fields for all 6,619 companies, but you are not able to export the entire contents of the database. Any other questions?
Well, is it possible to screen for net income increasing each quarter for the last 4 quarters? And you could it could be, net income or cash flow or whatever. How can you compare one field against another field?
Okay. So we're going to actually create. So let's compare, look at net income increasing over the last 4 quarters.
And
so
net income, you could do quarter over quarter, or you could do sequential, whichever one you think is most appropriate.
I normally look at same quarter year over year. That eliminates any seasonality. So example, you look at quarter 1 of 2016, compare that to quarter 1 of 2015 versus Q4 of 2015 versus Q1 of 2016. Almost all companies exhibit some level of seasonality, so I look at same year over year changes. That's personal preference of mine. So in this case, let's look, we're going to be comparing quarterly information, so we're going to be living within the income statement quarterly. So let's say we want to net income Q1 greater than net income. Now in Stock Investor, it's Q1, 2, 3, and 4. It allows that using a standardized naming convention such as that. Q1 always means then it's the most recently reported quarter for a particular company. So it, whatever company you're looking at, the data, the time period may be different, but Q1 will also always be the most recently reported quarter for a particular company. So we want to compare Q1 to, in this case, it's going to be Q5 because we want to look at the same quarter a year ago. So it's simply you just add 4 quarters to whatever quarter you're looking at. So we're going to be comparing Q1 to net income in Q5. So here we're looking at companies' net income for its most recently reported fiscal quarter is greater than the net income for the same quarter a year ago. And now this is a good example where the duplicate option will come into play. So let's say if we want this over 4 quarters, we want to see this sequential increase 4 quarters in a row. So we're going to duplicate this 3 more times, and we're simply going to up our net income quarter each time. And we have to do the same thing over here. So it's going to be net income Q6, Q7, and Q8. So again, we're looking for each of the last 4 quarters, we'll see an increase in net income compared to the same quarter a year ago. And clicking on the how many, we can see then how many companies meet each of these individual pieces of criteria. And we have gone from 6,619 companies down to 781 companies that pass.
And we've got time for one more question here, and that is, what is the delay typically from earnings reports to data appearing in Stock Investor Pro?
This, it ultimately boils down to the company you're looking at. Thomson Reuters places higher emphasis on larger capitalization and more actively traded companies. You know, if you're looking at, for example, like an Apple, I've seen where, especially now that we have daily data updates, I've seen where Apple maybe report one day and the next day the updated data from that earnings release makes its way into the database. I've also seen, I was working with a member about a month or so ago that for whatever reason it was about 6 weeks between when the company announced its earnings and the earnings release, the latest earnings release data made its way into the database. Brought that to the attention of Thomson Reuters, and that data was updated within the next day or two. That is definitely an anomaly. Thomson Reuters, you know, is normally pretty good about things like that. But again, it's you're going to see if it's a well-known, high market cap, heavily traded, heavy analyst following stock. It could be, you know, within a day, maybe 2 or 3 at the absolute most. You know, I would say on average, I mean, typically it's no more than, you know, maybe 4 or 5 days. Again, there are the occasional outliers, but that is my experience. That's normally the quote-unquote lag between a company announcing and the data actually getting into the database.
Excellent. And just a quick question. So if anybody should have any questions about Stock Investor Pro or even the stock screens on the website, is there a specific email they should use to request those questions?
I would say, you know, the easiest way is to email us at techsupport, TECHSUPPORT, @aai.com. You know, we have a staff that is constantly monitoring that. I normally, if I'm available, actually will even answer those emails on weekends. I make every effort to respond to those emails, you know, typically, you know, the vast majority of times within 24 hours. So I would say that is the easiest and quickest way to get a response if you're having either a problem with Stock Investor or if you have a question about Stock Investor, to contact us by email at techsupport@aai.com. So thank you, John, for moderating today, and everyone have a wonderful afternoon.